Well, Holmes, another evening settles upon Baker Street. The fire burns brightly, thank goodness, warding off the chill that seems to seep in with this November fog. It's on evenings like this, comfortable in our old chairs, that my mind wanders back, particularly as I've just seen my latest account published. The Adventure of the Toxic Tonic, I called it.
Ah yes, the unfortunate affair of Dr. Finch and his much-lauded, ultimately lethal Elixir. A remarkable case, Watson, less for its chemical complexities, perhaps, than for its demonstration of the extraordinary power of public belief when confronted with the veneer of scientific progress.
Indeed, I tried to capture the atmosphere of the time in my narrative, the initial excitement, the glowing advertisements promising vitality, and then the creeping dread. London was quite gripped by panic when those deaths began to surface, linked only by that ubiquitous little brown bottle.
Panic born from shattered faith. People desperately wished Finch's claims to be true, Watson. They embraced the promise long before any verifiable evidence was presented, and certainly long after contradictory evidence began to mount. Belief, my dear fellow, can be a far more potent and dangerous concoction than anything found in a chemist's flask.
Thinking back, Holmes, it truly began with Mrs. Vance, didn't it? I remember her sitting in that very chair, a study in controlled grief, yet with such tenacity. She simply refused to accept the official explanation for her husband's sudden passing.
A commendable determination, Watson. Grief often clouds judgment, but in her case, it sharpened her resolve. She possessed an intuitive certainty that something was dreadfully amiss despite the coroner's verdict.
And her husband wasn't an isolated case, though the connections weren't immediately apparent. Reports were trickling in from various parts of London, sudden collapses, inexplicable fatalities among seemingly healthy individuals. The physicians seemed utterly perplexed, grasping at straws like acute indigestion or unforeseen cardiac event.
Perplexed because the single unifying factor was unthinkable to them, the ubiquitous vitality elixir peddled by Dr. Alistair Finch. You couldn't walk a London street without being confronted by its advertisements. Bold posters, insistent newspaper columns, proclaiming it the dawn of a new age of health.
Indeed, it had captured the public imagination entirely. Finch's marketing was relentless, promising vigor, longevity, a veritable miracle in a bottle. It became the talk of the town, a staple in countless households, mine included for a brief period, I confess, before these troubling accounts surfaced.
And that, Watson, was the element that truly snagged my attention. Not merely the deaths themselves, however tragic, but the inherent contradiction. A preparation lauded as a restorative, a promoter of life, apparently acting as its very antithesis. A cure that kills. Such an anomaly presents a unique intellectual challenge demanding investigation.
One cannot deny, Holmes, the sheer force of Dr. Alistair Finch's public persona. He cut quite the figure, the very model of scientific progress, charismatic and utterly convincing to so many.
A carefully constructed facade, Watson. Necessary, perhaps, for a man peddling miracles in a bottle to an eager populace.
And his factory. I remember the illustrations in the popular press, gleaming copper vats, uniformed attendants moving with purpose, an air of absolute precision and hygiene. It seemed the very pinnacle of modern, efficient production.
Indeed, a spectacle designed to impress, to reassure. Much like his advertising, which, one must admit, was remarkably pervasive. Those bold posters seemed to adorn every hoarding in London. Every newspaper carried his pronouncements of scientific breakthrough.
They promised vitality, a scientific marvel delivered directly to one's doorstep. It was difficult not to be swept up, especially when faced with such apparent sophistication and modernity.
Difficult perhaps if one only observed the surface gloss. Yet, even during my initial considerations, certain discrepancies presented themselves. Minor points, easily overlooked amidst the general acclaim, but suggestive nonetheless. A slight inconsistency in the reported bottling schedules I chanced upon. A curious uniformity in the early testimonials that felt manufactured. The almost *2* perfect sheen on machinery that supposedly ran day and night.
Subtle points indeed, easily missed. I recall later, during the height of the inquiry, how plausible Finch remained. Even under intense scrutiny, his explanations for the initial tragedies seemed, well, terribly unfortunate, certainly, but scientifically defensible, at least to the layman, and initially to the constabulary.
He possessed a formidable intellect, Watson, and the ability to deploy it defensively. He understood the power of presentation, both in his product and in himself. The polish was thick, designed to deflect deeper examination.
It certainly deflected the public's doubts for a considerable time. The image of that pristine factory and the doctor's confident assurances were powerful antidotes to the growing unease, even as the death toll mounted. And it's a distinct pleasure to have joining us by the fire tonight, Inspector Hardcastle, or should I say, Chief Inspector now. It has been some years indeed. We were just recalling the outward brilliance of Finch's operation, but the official investigation faced quite a different reality, I believe.
Chief Inspector, yes, time does move on, Dr. Watson. Thank you for inviting me. Indeed, the tonic case was trying from Scotland Yard's perspective. Baffling deaths, public clamor, but precious little for us to proceed upon in the conventional manner.
Conventionality being the very bedrock that seemed to crumble in this affair, Inspector. The challenge lay not merely in a lack of evidence, but in the asterisk nature of the incidents themselves, defying standard categorization. A cure that killed, presented with scientific aplomb.
Precisely, Mr. Holmes, we were adrift. I recall vividly presenting my preliminary findings on the cluster of deaths linked to the tonic. My superiors, well, they demanded tangible proof, a clear motive, something beyond circumstantial links to Dr. Finch, who was, after all, a celebrated figure. There was considerable resistance, almost an unwillingness, to allocate resources towards investigating a man lauded as a public benefactor without irrefutable evidence. Find me a disgruntled employee, Hardcastle, one superintendent advised, or a clear financial trail. Don't bring me shadows and suspicions about a popular remedy. We simply lack the means, and frankly, the institutional will at that stage to dig deeper based on anomalies alone.
A stark contrast, indeed, to your own methods, Holmes. You were never quite so constrained by the need for officially sanctioned proof before pursuing a line of inquiry, however unorthodox.
That is certainly true, Dr. Watson. Mr. Holmes possessed the singular advantage of independence. He could follow threads, scientific curiosities, inconsistencies in advertising, whispers of industrial gangs that we at the Yard, bound by procedure and the burden of proof required for prosecution, could scarcely acknowledge, let alone pursue effectively. Our hands were often tied until the facts were undeniable.
The undeniable often requires a period of intense scrutiny into the unconventional Inspector. When faced with a puzzle woven from modern science and commerce, the old methods, however reliable for burglary or assault, prove inadequate. One must adapt the lens to the subject.
Beyond the immediate tragedy and the perplexing science, Holmes, the investigation became further entangled, didn't it? There were whispers, shadows moving at the periphery.
Indeed, Watson, while Inspector Hardcastle wrestled with the official constraints we discussed, I found myself contemplating two seemingly divergent, yet equally troubling threads. One was rumor, the other data.
You refer, I imagine, to the persistent street talk concerning the Clockwork Gang.
Precisely, a nasty collection of industrial thieves known for their interest in acquiring manufacturing secrets. The rumor mill suggested they had cast their acquisitive eye upon Finch's unique preservative process, the very element he claimed kept his tonic stable and potent.
It seemed almost outlandish at the time, a violent gang interested in a health elixir, but it certainly added another layer of complexity.
For Scotland Yard, such rumors were problematic, chasing shadows based on whispers from the underworld, Without concrete evidence linking the gang directly to Finch or the deaths, it was impossible to justify dedicating significant resources. We needed facts, not speculation, however intriguing.
And while those whispers circulated, the facts I could observe were equally perplexing. I refer to the inconsistencies within Finch's advertising campaigns. You recall, Watson, the sudden shifts in the promotional copy. The claims subtly altered, the distribution patterns inexplicably changed in certain boroughs.
Yes, I remember you poring over those newspaper advertisements and delivery schedules. At the time, I confess, I struggled to see the connection between shifting slogans and the grim reality of the deaths.
It suggested instability, Watson, a frantic attempt to manage perception, perhaps, or reacting to something unforeseen. Why alter a successful campaign? Why change distribution? These were anomalies demanding explanation, quite separate from the lurid tales of the Clockwork Gang.
And that was the crux of the difficulty. We had potential industrial espionage on one hand, suspicious marketing practices on the other, and unexplained deaths at the center. Trying to weave those disparate threads into a coherent line of inquiry, especially within the procedural bounds of the Yard, it was a significant challenge.
It felt like juggling smoke, trying to grasp the connections between a ruthless gang, glossy advertisements, and a deadly tonic.
Indeed, a case demanding synthesis, Watson. One had to connect the outward efficiency of Finch's bottling operation, the subtle shifts in his promotional narratives, and the very scientific principles he invoked, principles barely understood outside of university laboratories at the time. It required seeing the pattern where others saw only disparate elements.
And chronicling, it presented its own difficulties, Holmes. Explaining the potential, however experimental, of techniques like spectroscopy, while also navigating the profound ethical questions raised. It's a delicate balance. How does one capture the allure of progress, alongside the shadow of unchecked ambition for the reading public, without resorting to melodrama?
A question society still grapples with, Doctor. The case certainly underscored the immense pressures commerce can exert upon scientific endeavor. It served as a rather sobering lesson at Scotland Yard about the potential consequences when innovation outpaces regulation and ethical consideration. Its legacy, I believe, lies in that very caution it instilled, however belatedly.
Caution, yes, and a reminder that justice isn't always found solely in the dark, but sometimes in the harsh light cast upon irresponsible practices.
Well said, Holmes. Inspector Hardcastle, thank you so much for sharing your invaluable perspective with us this evening. It has certainly illuminated aspects of the affair I hadn't fully appreciated.
The pleasure was mine, gentlemen. Reflecting on these old cases, it brings clarity. Good evening.
Good evening, Inspector. Well, Holmes, another case revisited by the fireside. Perhaps next time we might delve into a matter somewhat different, involving, if memory serves, the curious disappearance on the moors and a rather singular hound.
A distinct possibility, my dear fellow, a distinct possibility.